Welcome back to Basin Motorsports for another day here in the garage. So today I'm celebrating my 10-year anniversary here on YouTube. Imagine back December 24th, 2009 at 9:24 a.m. my very first video on the Nissan Versa Nismo concept went live. So today I thought we'd take a minute to look back at what has gone on over the last 10 years and think about that. 10 years, a decade. I've been making videos and slamming them out on the internet. So the very first video I did was a kind of a proof of concept, and the intent was to kind of generate some interest for a Versa Nismo edition. Now the Versa is here in the US, but the Tita is made in other parts of the world, so it is a very global car. It's sold in many markets around the world. The plan was I was trying to sway the product planning group here in America to influence back to Japan and come up with a Nismo version of the Nissan Versa or Tita. So about the first 9 months of my channel was focused on building the Nismo version of the Tita or Versa. So the intention of it was to build a real-life Versa with a Nismo edition using only Nissan parts spec'd out. Now granted, I did put in some stainless steel brake lines. I did put in a big splitter for carbon fiber that I got from APR. But the intention was to use only Nissan parts to build something kind of like a little mini hot hatch supercar that I could later get product planning in. Now if you remember back, my Versa was later shown in both Super Street and in modified magazines in the reader's rides. And boy, did it cause a stir when it happened. Now the first part about that, the first video I did, I used some music that I found online because back then in 2009, nobody was worried about copyright. YouTube was kind of this whole thing about family videos and everything else. And we started out with no monetization. There were no end screens. There really was just you put a video out and there it was. Later on, that video got me a copyright strike for the music I used, which was a 2001 Odyssey, and it was my first chance of really kind of getting the understanding of what being a creator was about. So the Versa build took me to about the mid-September range of 2010, and this is the gray one I had. At that point, I was didn't really know what I was doing. I was just winging out videos whenever I could. I didn't have a strategy. I was just putting videos out because I liked doing it. And I was using it as a way to kind of answer some questions, which was the original intent of the channel, to answer questions on people that needed help on the Versa, etc. And even back then, forums were still pretty big. So I was a moderator for the Versa section on nicoclub.com. So when the Versa project kind of ended, I was just going to drive it at that point. It really wasn't going anywhere with the product planning. So I thought, well, I'm going to take some time off. So that time off was a year. Nothing really going on with the channel. I didn't really post anything up. I wasn't even really monitoring it. I just left the stuff out there to kind of just, I guess, gain views, but I didn't know what to do with it at the time because there really wasn't a strategy out there. There wasn't anybody doing this full time. It was kind of like everybody was kind of fumbling a little bit with YouTube. And so I took a year off. Now the year I came back in mid-September 2011, I had my 240SX. Now this is one I bought literally from somebody kind of near in town. I was looking for another kind of project thing, and 240s were at the time a hot car to build. Still are, but at the time nobody had really done a lot of documentation of answering questions or a build. So I went and bought this 240SX. I winched it out this guy's backyard. He had it under a tree, so it was full of sap and pine needles, and it didn't run. And a friend I had that I was working with brought it home to my house, and within 20 minutes we figured out that it was just a burned connector on it, and that baby fired right up. So that took me from mid-September of 2011 all the way to July 2012. Now in that time frame, I had stripped that car pretty much out. I'd replaced the engine. I'd undercoated it using some Nissan factory stuff I got because I worked at a factory. It was very available. A lot of factory parts I was able to get through inside Nissan sources from Japan and everywhere else. So it was a really good time to be an employee of a car company because I could get a lot of stuff that probably wasn't available elsewhere. At that point on, I really I had some sponsorship, I guess you'd call it, back when I did the Versa with Versa Speed, but this is where I really started focusing on getting true sponsors to back me up. So thankfully, Njuku Racing jumped in because they were really big into 240SX at that time, and they helped me out with the radiator and getting me some better stuff on bushings, control arms and that, and Design Engineering. This is the first time they joined me. Design Engineering jumped in with me on the 240SX to do some cool tubes, some other stuff, some shrink wrap, some header wrap, and the boom mat that went inside the 240SX. So once I kind of finished that up in July 2012, there again, I vanished. And I really didn't do anything other than I drove it around. Now, I will say that I wasn't making a lot of video content, but I did have a blog page, and so I had a lot of pictures and text, and that's kind of where blogs were getting kind of really popular. YouTube wasn't monetized at the time, nothing was really going on. I wasn't doing anything with the content, so I was focusing on doing the writing thing, doing the pictures. I had a blog somewhere like Blogger or Blogspot or whatever it was at the time. Maybe it was just WordPress, but there was really nothing going on. So I focused on that, and eventually I stopped posting there and took some time off. So around March 2014, I went through and I blasted out like 6 videos, and this was me processing some old VHS tapes into digital content. So what you'll find there is some test and tune from 1997, where I had my first Mustang, or one of the Mustangs I owned. It was a black GT hatchback that I had bought out of Dallas, Texas when I lived there. I also did some all-4 days from Bandimere Speedway. I think that was in 96. And then I did some speaker competitions or some stereo competitions in 95 when I actually lived in Dallas. Now again, you're gonna watch it if you go back that far and realize, man, the footage was terrible. But you have to remember, this is one of those big camcorders you had, filming back then in the mid 90s really, and the footage converting over to digital compared to what HD is and 4K is today, it is flat terrible. But you have to remember, back in 95, it was cutting edge technology. So enjoy that. Enjoy if you watch back to it thinking, this is where we came from. So today, the technology and the 4K and the resolution is fantastic, but in 1995, it really wasn't. So here's another point where I had a hiatus. I came back in September of 2015. And at that point, I had already been gone over a year, and people really didn't know anything about what was going on. But I ended up moving from Mississippi. I left Nissan and I moved out to Oregon. Now the reason was, it was kind of family issues. My father-in-law had cancer, and my wife really wanted to move back to Oregon, so we facilitated that move. We got out here, and by that time I had moved. I had been here almost like 9-10 months, and I gave you the first episode here in kind of the new shop. At that point, it didn't have garage doors, it didn't have lights, it was a daytime thing, but I was showing you that I put new cabinets in. Those are the same red cabinets you have here that I bought way back when, put in storage, and I had installed those. So it's kind of like a, hey, where have I been? Well, here's an update of that. Now soon after that, I kicked off the 92 rebuild. Now this is a car I got off Craigslist for a couple $1,000. It was a 92, the wild strawberry color. Really was pretty abused up, but it was a 5-liter, 5-speed, 8.8 rear end. It was all original. It was pretty beat up and haggard, but about the next 7 or 8 months, I ended up rebuilding that here in the shop. And this is the first garage build, I would say, here at Basin Motorsports. And at the time, I don't think I was even calling it Basin Motorsports. I just had it back to my name, and I did the rebuild. So we go forward to the next year in mid-March of 2016. That's when I took my coupe out for my first debut drive. It was snowy out. And 36 miles later, a nice family from Sacramento ended up rear-ending the car, crushing the trunk all the way up to the driver's door, and basically destroyed that car. So at this point, I can say after the 92 was wrecked, I really, I was in a bad place. I was like, I couldn't believe it had been wrecked, and I didn't really know what I was going to do concerning the channel itself. So a month later, I ended up buying what I called at the time was Project Jotman, and that stood for Jack of all trades, master of none. It was kind of like an all-around all around car, really. Enough horsepower to get into trouble. It would handle well. At that point, I didn't even think it was going to be a wide body. But I ended up buying it, kind of kicked off that build itself. And there was a day in that time frame that made a difference that, wow, changed the future of this channel. So let me go back to a comment my nephew made, and I think at the time he was like 12 or 11. Here we are at Thanksgiving the previous year, which would have been 2015, and he had said, you know, there's people out there making a fortune on YouTube. And so here's the date, June 23rd in 2016. And I remember this because it sticks out in my mind very well. I was traveling that point and I was looking at my YouTube numbers. And I was kind of like, nah, I don't really know what I'm going to do. But I thought, oh man, I should really kind of actually pay attention to this, because I was 6.5 years in. At the time, my channel had a total of 640,000 views. And my estimated revenue at the time was like $2.36. So I made this comment on Instagram. I took a picture of it. I jokingly said, you know, I must be a dollar error because my nephew says that people are making a fortune. So a guy named Kyle Voss, and if you don't know Kyle, he was at the time, I think, around 30,000 subs on his channel called the Fab Forums. And so at the point, I think I was watching some of his stuff for carbon fiber builds. I think he was building at the time his Grey Goose, which he still has, which is like I think it's a 400 cubic inch twin turbo build. Anyway, he makes a thing. He says, you must have something wrong with your monetization, because you should have made way more money than $2 for that many views. And so I knew who Kyle was, and he was way bigger than I was, because I think I was like maybe around 2,000 subs or something. It wasn't a lot. But I started at that point taking notice of the business side of YouTube. So at that point, I could tell you that I, at 6.5 years in, didn't pay attention to anything on the metrics side, on how to run a business, on content creation, or anything like that. I didn't even know there was such thing as monetization. So at that point, I started doing a lot of research into monetization, into content creation as like a side business kind of deal. And if you notice from that point on, I started pounding out the videos week over week, especially on what turned into Project Widefox, which was the wide body piece of it. But I was pounding out content like week over week over week. And thankfully, Kyle was gracious enough to really sit down and have these weird random conversations where he was in his garage working, I was in my garage working, in between filming, shooting. Both of us were making content on our sides, and he would basically type something back. I'd film a little bit, I'd type something back, and this was all just through DM. I think it was on Instagram at the time, but he gave me some really good advice. So I started at that point making this channel really more about focusing on strategy. No more of I put 6 videos out and I let them sit out there and I come back in 3 months later. This was a week over week transition, and you can go back through all of my pages of my videos. You can clearly see a change from where it was kind of like plopped out there 4 or 5. A few months later, a couple more, and then it was a video week after week after week after week. And I think there was a point in there where I hit like 80 something weeks in a row. I had at least a video, but sometimes upwards of like 4 in there. Now, a lot of you guys have probably shown up since the widefox build got kicked off, because I was really pumping out the videos, doing a lot of content and building up stuff. And I picked up, let's see, if I was there at 640,000, I'm right about 1.64 million at this point. So at that point in the last 3.5 years, basically I've picked up 1 million views, which is phenomenal, I think, compared to then. And the monetization, it's gotten a lot better, honestly, since then. Now in that 3.5 years, it's been more than just content on wide body or Mustangs. I did basically I think it was 24 videos in a row called the Recruiter Diaries as a test, which completely flopped. but it was based on around my job and all the mistakes I'd seen with people going through the recruiting process trying to find a job. That was a complete flop. Didn't do anything, but hey, whatever. So I also did a student to master series, which was basically I found people that were experts in their field, and they stepped through kind of like how they went from a student basically and how they got to the master with advice. I did 6 episodes of that. Again, completely flopped. I also went through and did something I had seen other YouTubers doing at the time. I went through and did the enthusiast toolbox, where I was going through and kind of reviewing, showing you guys what's in my toolbox, and I can honestly say that, again, was a pretty big flop. So that kind of brings us to today, the 10-year anniversary of the channel, of what I started with and where I am today. So right now when I'm filming this, it's a couple weeks ahead or about a week ahead. I'm right around the 3950 in subs. I'm right around 1.63 something in views. And the question in the title is, have I wasted 10 years on YouTube? I'm going to say no. So you got to remember the original intent 10 years ago, without having strategy and monetization and everything else, the original intent was to help others with information. It was originally on the Versa 240SX. I've done it through builds with building 2 different Mustangs, onto the third one, which was the Gray Lady. And I think I've received enough comments along the way that I've really helped people save money. I've helped them figure out how to fix stuff. I've done some entertainment in various pieces, and I think it's been worth it. Now you're going to ask, well, what does the future hold? I really don't even know. I didn't know I was going to get to the 10-year mark. So to say I'm going to be here at 15, say here at 20 and beyond, who knows? YouTube may fall out of favor. It may go on to something else, to another platform. I don't know. But I've enjoyed the ride this time, all the way for the last 10 years. And I'm going to keep making content on some frequency, whether that's weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever it is. And whatever build that's going to be next beyond the Gray Lady, I don't know. But I hope you guys have kind of enjoyed kind of stepping through history with me, kind of some memories that I've gone back through over the last 10 years. Think about that. A decade I've been out doing videos in some fashion, and I have learned a ton along the way. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this step through time with me. Hit the like, hit the subscribe if you're new to the channel. And if you're not and you've been around for a while, hopefully you've seen a good positive change through the channel, whether it's been entertainment or information. We'll see you next time.